Hello, happy Wednesday. It has been a long time since I have come on here and done a live, but I have missed doing book studies. And so I really enjoy reading. I really enjoy digging into books. So I decided to start them up again. So I have my two previous book studies that I have done already. They're over on YouTube. You can watch them whenever. But I read this book at the end of last year. It's The Circle Maker. And the more I just think about it, the more I'm like, this is just such a good book. It's one of those books that I feel like you can never read too much. It's one of those, you just need that constant reminder. You have to keep going back to it. And it was just really good. So I talked to my husband a lot about it. My husband's a business owner. And so between the two of us, I feel like there's just really good concepts and principles just for everybody that we just need that constant reminder. So Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 are pretty short, so I'm going to combine them, and then we will keep going through the book over the next couple of weeks until we get to the end. But I titled this, Don't Offend God, because I think a lot of what it's laying the foundation for is when you aren't praying enough, you're not praying boldly enough, you're not stepping into your calling that God has called you to do, then you're basically telling God, I know you created me for more, but it makes me a little uncomfortable. So no, you don't know what you're doing with me. You don't know, what I've been through. So I'm just going to stay in my comfort zone. I'm just going to stay here and do this. And I'm not going to go to my potential. So don't offend God. So it starts in Chapter 1 with the legend of the Circle Maker. And if you've been to a previous book study, this is a story that is actually talked about in a lot of the books that I have read over the last year and a half, 2 years. And so I feel like when there's something that keeps getting brought up by these authors who are, big on, praying and big on personal development and big on just fulfilling your life calling, you have to stop and pay attention. Don't let yourself just gloss over it. Dig your heels in and say okay, this is a lesson I need to understand. I have to remember this. And so the legend of the Circle Maker is a guy named Honi, and he was back in Israel in the time of the drought, and there was a risk of the entire population just dying. There was no water, there was no food. They were really on the brink of in existence. And so they were looking to everybody, pray to your God, do this. What are we going to do? We have to get this rain to pour down. And so they finally approached Tony, and he agreed that he would pray to God for him to send rain. And so he did. He came out into the village, and he drew this huge circle in the sand, and he stood inside it, and he prayed to God, and he asked God to send down rain. And the more he prayed and the longer he prayed, God would send down the rain. And so they were all wow, this is amazing. But Honi was not okay with God just sending down some sprinkles. He knew that there was a drought. They needed a heavy downpour of rain. They needed almost this flooding of rain that just wet everything in the entire country. And so he stood there and he continued to pray. And the author puts it this way, Honi gets down in the sand. He lifts his head, he's on his knees, lifts his hands to the heavens, and he prays to God to send down rain. He says, Lord of the universe, I swear before your great name. So he prayed with authority. He did not pray with God, if you could please, with any sort of timidness or I'm not sure if you'll answer this, so I'm going to ask, but maybe you aren't going to. It was with authority, I swear before your great name, you are going to do this. And he said, he humbled himself, and then he said he prayed expectantly. He didn't pray with just I hope you do this for me. It was he expected God to send the rain. He used that authority, and he said, pour down rain from heaven. Allow this drought to cease. He prayed with such authority, and he knew that if he did that he had such strong faith that God was going to give him what he was asking for. So he continued to pray, and it went from a sprinkling to a medium rain to just a heavy downpour, because he stood there. He stayed in that circle and he prayed to God. and he continued to pray with such authority that he knew God was going to answer it. So that story is talked about a lot, and I feel like it gives the idea of just digging your heels in. Like, when you are praying, like, don't stop. Like, they even said, like, in other books, like, Coney did not leave that circle until that rain came down, and until he was happy with the amount of rain that God was sending down. He just stood there and he prayed, and he just kept praying. He did not let up. He did not, like, look for help. He didn't ask for food. He didn't ask for water. He stayed there and he continued to pray until God had sent down exactly what he was looking for. And so then getting into chapter 2, it talks about circle makers. And so it uses that concept of Honi when he drew that big circle in the sand and he stood there and he prayed. And in the beginning of chapter 2, it says, God is still looking for circle makers. Bold prayers honor God, and God honors bold prayers. God isn't offended by your biggest dreams or boldest prayers. He's offended by anything less. If your prayers aren't possible for you, they are insulting to God. And I just feel like you step back for a second and you're like, whoa. Like, if my prayers are possible for me, then that's insulting. Because then that's like saying, God, I don't trust you enough to pray for something really big. So as long as I can control it, as long as I know the outcome, I will pray for it because I know that I can achieve it. But when you pray something outside your comfort zone, when you pray something that's bigger and bolder than anything that you know that you can possibly do, that's when God is honored. That's when God wants to bless you, because he's saying, okay, you know the power that I have and you're seeking me and you need me to accomplish this. And so that honors God. It says, our impossible prayers move God to show his omnipotent action. So if we are praying possible prayers for us, what does God have to show us? He doesn't have to come in and, help us out. Like, we always need his strength and his power. But when we say, oh, I want you to do this for me, but we know in our own strength that we can go and do it, then God's like, okay, go and do it. You take that blessing and you go do it. But when you're serious about what you are going after, come back. Pray a little harder, pray a little bolder, and then let's get serious about making it happen. So on page 13, it says, there is nothing God loves more than keeping promises, answering prayers, performing miracles, and fulfilling dreams. That is who he is and what he does. The bigger the circle we draw, the better, because God gets more glory. And that's something like this exact phrase, this exact quote from this book is something that Nathan and I have talked a lot about over the last couple of weeks. And it's like, when you're in the trenches, when you're going through a hard season, it's like, man, I wish God would just bring me out of it. And then it's like, but the more we're in it and the more God puts us through these trials, the more glory he's going to get on the outside. So he's going to wait until we are at our weakest point, and then he's going to bring his glory. Then he's going to show himself and how strong and mighty he is, because we could not in our own strength accomplish what we're trying to do. And so that is one of the biggest things that has stuck out to me. But it says, God is ready and waiting. You are only one prayer away from a dream fulfilled, a promise kept, or a miracle performed. That's it. Just one prayer away. You just have to keep praying. You have to get in that circle, and you have to just keep asking God and being bold and allowing yourself to think outside of your box, outside of your circle, and say, I know I can do this, but if I pray for this, it's so much bigger than anything I know I can do. So I'm going to pray for this, or I'm going to pray even bigger than that. And I'm going to just be really bold and really out of my mind in this prayer and say, God, I know you can do it. I know how strong and mighty you are. So allow this to happen. Okay. So continue on. If you don't believe that God is for you, then you will pray small, timid prayers instead of big, audacious prayers. Who you become is determined by how you pray. This transcript of your prayers becomes the script for your life. So again, if you're praying those small, timid prayers and you're saying, okay, God, I pray that you will provide groceries this week, or I pray that you'll give us the finances to, live just a mediocre life. He'll give it to you. He'll allow you to have a comfortable life. But are you willing to pray for more than that? Are you willing to pray a bolder prayer, something that you know is way outside your control, and stick to it and allow yourself to dig your heels in and say, I don't know when this will happen, but I'm going to keep praying for it because I know that God will give it to me. And I know God wants to prove himself. I know how God is so omnipotent and so mighty. And so I'm going to keep praying for this. It says our prayers have to match God's calling for our lives. So his sovereign will becomes our sanctified wish. It's not like I'm just going to pray for this because maybe this is what my path is for. Like, no, like you have to get alone with God. And we talked in a previous book study about meditating and praying and allowing God to speak to you and show you what he wants for your life. And when you take that time and you sit back and you allow yourself to really like figure out what does God want for my life and what is he doing and where does he want me to go, then you pray for that. Even if it's like something way outside your comfort zone, even if you're 45 or 70, it doesn't matter. Sit down and say like, God, is this really all you have for me? Is this what you want for my life? What do you want me to do? And then lean into that and continue praying for it. The ultimate goal isn't getting what we want, but glorifying God by drawing circles around the promises, miracles, and dreams he wants for you. It's not about you. It's not praying what you want. It's praying what he wants. Because when you pray what he wants, he'll make you really uncomfortable. He will take you where he wants you to go, and he's going to change you in the process. But that's exactly what he wants to do. He doesn't want you to be comfortable. He wants you to be content. He wants you to be happy in whatever place he puts you, but he doesn't want you to be comfortable. He wants you to grow. He wants you to get outside your comfort zone. He wants you to achieve all the things that he has for you, even though they're hard sometimes. And even though it's going to take a whole lot of trials to get you where you need to go, because you have to become the person he wants you to be. It says the author prayed his first prayer circle after a failed church plant. And I feel like, so the author talks about, if you get this book, read through it, but chapter 2, he talks about how he felt called to go, start a church plant. And so he did that. He went to a city. He tried doing this church plant and it was unsuccessful. He just completely failed. And he walked away and he kind of like told his wife, like, I don't know if I could do this again. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do what I want to accomplish. Like, I really felt called for a church plant, but here we are in the midst of this and like, this is not successful. And then he gets a call from somebody else and they want him to plant a church in DC. And he thought, if I couldn't make it successful here, how can I go to DC and make a successful church plant over there? But he prayed about it and he felt like this was what God was calling him to do. So he went. And he said, I felt underqualified and overwhelmed, but that is when God has you right where he wants you. When you feel underqualified and overwhelmed by what God's calling you to do, that's what he wants. He wants to know that you have the faith to take that first step and say, okay, I trust you, God. And then each step of the way, keep doing that. Every time that you doubt, every time that you're uncomfortable, keep trusting that he knows what is best and that on the other side of that obedience, there's something bigger. It says Joshua 1:3, I will give you every place where you set your foot as I promised Moses. So the author read this verse and he said it spoke to him and prompted him to walk prayer circles around their area in DC. He used to just pray inside his office and pace back and forth and just spend time with the Lord, like praying and thinking about the city and the places and the people. And, he didn't know them by name. He didn't know who he was supposed to reach, but he would pray and say, God, I pray that you bring these people to me. But then he felt it in his heart to just start walking around the city and walk that circle and walk their area and start praying for the places that he was walking and all of the people that he was walking past. And he said that was it. Like, he was praying circles around that city, literal circles, walking around the city and praying for them. And he said this promise from Joshua was transferred from Moses to Joshua, and God would transfer the promise to us if we have enough faith to circle it. So that 3-hour prayer walk that he walked, he said, even today, 15 years later, God is still answering those prayers from that 3-hour prayer walk. All he did was obey God. He just got up, he moved to the city, and he obeyed God. That's all he did. And he said, I prayed big, bold prayers, and I walked through that city, and I prayed for the people, and I prayed that every place I stepped my foot, that God would bless, that God would allow me to have an impact on this city, and he has. So page 16, this is right at the end of chapter 2. Every miracle can be traced back to an origin, the original prayer circle. God won't do it unless you pray for it. We have not because we ask not. The greatest tragedy in life is the prayers that go unanswered because they go unasked. And I thought, am I praying enough? Like, am I asking God for enough? Am I being bold enough? Because if I'm not, the greatest prayers that aren't answered are the ones that are unasked. Are we asking God to do the big, bold things? Are we asking God for more than what we even think is possible or even imaginable? Because if we're not allowing God to show who he is and what he can actually do. We're relying on ourselves. And it's going to take time. It's not like we immediately pray this big, bold prayer and God's like, okay, here's everything you need. Here's the answer to your prayer. No, we have to go and work for it. And we have to be consistent in that prayer. We have to trust the process. And he's going to turn us into the people we need to be to get where we are going. So right at the end, it says, if you do pray, you can live with holy anticipation that he will answer it. It's time to start circling. So the concept of getting your prayer circle, I even thought like for my office, getting like a circle rug and putting it in here and just thinking like every time I come in my office, just thinking, what is the biggest, boldest prayer I can pray today? What is one thing that is completely outside my control that I need to start praying for? And having that visual representation of that circle. Maybe it's drawing chalk, maybe it like on your carpet, or maybe it's putting tape, or just having like a circle mirror and putting prayers on it that you think are really big and bold that God would never allow you to achieve. Yet here you are asking and praying, because when we do that ask, when we do the prayer to God, he wants to fulfill it. He wants us to live to the boldest, best life possible. He doesn't want us to be mediocre, because he's not a mediocre God. And so chapter 1 and 2 are just the beginning. This book is so good. And again, it's one of those books that you just have to keep reading over and over and over again, because you catch new things. And so that is the end of chapter 1, chapter 2 of The Circle Maker. If you don't have this book, go get it. This is my second time through it. And I'm really excited about doing the book study because I need the reminder. I need to refresh my memory of it all. And I need to remember to go and pray the bold prayers. Don't allow myself to be stuck in the just praying for the small things, knowing that he's going to fulfill them, knowing that he's going to put food on our table, knowing that he's going to care for our health. I have to be bold. So that's the end. I will hopefully keep doing these every week to the end of this book. I got off track for a little while, and it feels good to be back. And I really do enjoy book studies. I really do enjoy digging into them and, pulling out some little nuggets for people to take. And so if you haven't seen the previous ones, you can find them all. Just search my Instagram handle on YouTube. They're all over there. And hopefully I will see you guys next week. Thanks so much for joining.